For my math/creative credit lesson, I created a game called Math-a-thon. The objective of this game is to get your group's board piece from the starting point here all the way to one of these yellow points to eventually win yourself to the win spot. Whoever gets to this win spot first is the winner of the game. Now, how you start this game is that you get 4 to 8 people into 2 to 4 groups of 2 people each, and each group rolls the dice once. Whoever gets the highest number on the dice gets to go first. The groups whose has the first turn, they get to choose one person from their group to go, and that person in that group then has to flip over each pile over once, and then that first person has 10 seconds, which is indicated by one of these sand timers, to answer said question. And if they answer it, they get to roll the dice and move ahead so many spaces. So if it was the green person's turn, everyone flips over the card at once, and then they would have to answer 6 minus 5, which is 1. And when they do, they roll the dice, and they move ahead 5 spaces, which is what the dice got rolled to. Now, when it is someone's turn, they have a couple options if they do not know it that they can use once a game. So if it's the green person's turn and they don't know what 6 minus 1 is, they're allowed to ask their partner what the answer is, and then the partner has 5 seconds to answer the question. And if they answer the question correctly, then they are allowed to roll the dice, but they can only roll the numbers 1, 2, or 3. They are not allowed to roll 4, 5, or 6 for the little bit of a penalty for having to ask someone else, but they still get to go that turn. So if I would have to ask a friend, then the person would only move ahead, let's say, 2 spots. The other option is ask a foe. Then the ask a foe part is when the person doesn't know the answer, so they ask an enemy, someone on another team, to help them out, and if that person on the enemy team answers the question correctly for them in 5 seconds, then first off, the green person is allowed to roll the dice, only being able to roll the 1, 2, or 3. But also, the foe who got the answer right is allowed to roll the 1, 2, or 3 and move ahead so many spaces as they rolled. But if they get it wrong, no one's allowed to move anywhere. And then that person wasted their ask a foe something. So it's a bit of a strategy when you use it and when you can't use it. Now, the game board itself has many different spots that you're allowed to do. For instance, if you land on a white spot, that doesn't mean anything. You just land on it and your turn is done. If you land on a red spot, that group has to roll the dice and go back that many spots. So I would go back 1, 2 spots. The game board is directionally flowed from, let's say from this spot, it goes all the way over here, all the way up, and is shown by these green arrows on the side. If you land on one of these green arrow spots, that means you move into the inner circle. So from that turn, you directly move right up into here, and then your turn stops if you land on this green spot. Once you land on this inner spot, that's when you start moving around the circle, and you cannot leave the circle at any time unless certain qualities get met. So back to the spots on the board. If you land on a 0 spot, as here, if you land on a 0 spot, your team has to get a 0 card. Each group can only get 2 0 cards at a time, and what that means is that whenever they answer a question or have to flip over for their turn, they have to add that many zeros into their number. So again, let's do the 6 minus 5. Instead of being 6 minus 5 for that team, they would have to answer 600 minus 500. They have 10 seconds to answer that question, and then if they answer it right in the amount of time, then they can roll the dice and go as normal. Those 0 cards stick on you the entire game unless you do something which I will mention here in a moment. The next spot is the blue spots, the battle spots. The battle spots is the person who lands on it gets to challenge another person from another group. And what they do is that on the count of 3, each person, someone flips over each card, another set of cards over. So for here it'd be 8 plus 1, and with said 0 cards attached to each group. So green player has 2 0 cards, so they have to answer 800 plus 100. But if the person, let's say the blue team, doesn't have any 0 cards, they only have to answer 8 plus 1. Whoever answers it first wins that little match between the two. If the person who lands on the spot wins against the other person, they roll the dice, but they can only move ahead 1, 2, or 3 spots. So I roll it, I get a 3, I get to move ahead 3 spots more, and then their turn is done. Well, no matter what they land on after they land on this blue spot, they stop at whatever spot they land on. But if the person who lands on the blue spot loses, then the other person, the other team, gets to move ahead they gets to roll the dice, and they can move ahead 1, 2, or 3 depending on what they get. Now, the last spot, well, not the last spot, but the last normal spot would be one of these cells that I call the credit cell. What happens in the credit cell spot is that if you land on it, the person who lands on it has to, in 15 seconds, has to answer 3 problems that you flip over within those seconds, and if they do, nothing happens to them. They land on the spot, and then their turn is done. But if they don't answer those questions in 15 seconds, they have to remove all their 0 cards from them, and they have to move the piece all the way over to the unlock cell spot, which is right here. And then they have to go through the board all again. Finally, the last spot is the yellow spots, which is basically the win spots. What happens when you land on here is that it's a free-for-all. Everybody from every group gets involved, and every one person from 3 groups flips over each card at once. So for here it'd be 7, 3, and times. And with or without whatever 0 cards that person has at the time, the person whoever landed on the yellow spot, for this example, this green person, has to answer the 7 times 3 as faster than any other group. If they get it first, they win. But if another group answers it before the green person, then their turn is done, and they still have to keep on going around the board until they land on their yellow spot at another turn. This is it for Math-a-thon. I hope you enjoy the game.